In the past few minutes, government advisers have confirmed that they are not recommending a national NHS screening programme for prostate cancer. A panel of experts has recommended that only people with specific genetic mutations should be screened in an attempt to catch the disease earlier. The decision comes despite research indicating that a universal screening programme could prevent approximately 1,500 deaths a year. More than 63,000 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer every year, and more than 12,000 of them will die. Around 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed at some point in their lifetime. We'll speak to our science correspondent Thomas Moore in a moment, but first, he's been talking to Professor Sir Mike Richards, chair of the National Screening Committee, which has come up with the latest advice for the government.
What is it about the evidence as you see it now that means that you haven't changed your opinion, that the harms do outweigh the benefits?
I think with the population as a whole, we do now know that we would reduce the number of deaths from prostate cancer a little, but we still have to balance that against the harms which are of ongoing urinary leakage, ongoing sexual dysfunction that can arise from treatment of cancer, and also the anxiety that may be caused to men by knowing they've got a cancer, even though we think it's one that won't cause trouble.
But we do have this situation, this huge divide, the north to south, the well-off to the less well-off, where people who go and demand a test from their GP are much more likely to be diagnosed at an early stage.
They're more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. Whether that actually leads to changes in their life expectancy is much less certain, and it's a much smaller number. So we estimate that for every 1,000 men who get screened, probably 1 to 2 lives would be saved by it from prostate cancer. Actually, the overall death rate is very much the same.
And even though there have been the introductions of MRI scans and so on, there is nothing there that you can see that helps weed out the men who don't need further biopsies, who don't need treatment.
MRI scans have been produced advantages, and we take that into account in our estimates of both the benefits and the harms.
You have come under a lot of pressure from charities and from high-profile public figures like Sir Chris Hoy, who have said that, well, test those who are at higher risk then. Black men, those with a family risk. They are twice the risk perhaps of developing prostate cancer. They should know at an early stage whether they are likely to have any disease.
We do know that black men are at higher risk of developing the disease. What we don't know is whether they would derive any more benefit from being screened. And if we knew that, we would be offering them screening. And the problem is that, as yet, we've got very, very few patients from a black background who have actually been in any of the trials. We're trying to rectify that. The Transform study is going to be working hard to get us the data we need.
So who should be tested?
People who've got this BRCA gene abnormality, we are recommending that they get into a screening program. People who've got a strong family history, we would recommend that they have a PSA test. In some cases, if it's a very strong family history, they will also need genetic testing. So
that's what, 1 in 260 men have the BRCA gene?
Yes.
But not many of those will actually know they have it?
No, at the moment, people don't generally know whether they've got the gene. But if, for example, a man has a sister who's developed breast cancer at a young age, she may well know that she's got the gene. It should have been tested. And if that's the case, the relative, the man, would be able to say, no, I think I need to be tested, and that would be approved.
So it all comes down to a knowledge of personal health risk. That's the gateway to screening.
Certainly, the level of risk is an important factor, and if we can get better at knowing who is in those high-risk groups and whether those high-risk groups actually benefit more. With the BRCA gene, we do have evidence that not only do they have a higher incidence of cancer at a young age, but they are also more likely to die of it.
But in essence, it boils down to this. A woman has breast or ovarian cancer at a young age. She then has to get tested for this BRCA gene. She then needs to communicate that to all male relatives. They need to understand what the implications are for their own health risk.
That's true. Equally, if a man has a brother that develops prostate cancer at a young age, that man should be tested and then the relative should be tested.
But there's a huge hurdle there, isn't there? And it all comes down to often about education, understanding risk, what it means for themselves, and then having the confidence to go to their GP and say, I need to have PSA testing because I'm at much higher risk.
And we will be providing GPs with an update of all that we now know about the risks so that they can give balanced information to men who ask about PSA testing.
And that could still be overturned by the Health Secretary.
The screening committee makes recommendations, ministers decide.
And is that because you look at the hard facts, they have to be sensitive to the politics?
What ministers decide is up to them, but we will be informing them of the evidence base.
But it is the most common cancer in England, full stop. It is the only major cancer without a screening programme now. That will terrify many men.
I would like there to be a screening programme for prostate cancer, but I only want that as and when we know that the benefits outweigh the harms.
Well, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has responded to the advice from the committee, saying, I have always said I want to see screening in place for the most common cancer in men, provided this is backed by evidence. I want to change the NHS so it diagnoses earlier and treats faster. That aim will be balanced against the harms that wider screening could cause to men. I'll examine the evidence and arguments in this draft recommendation thoroughly, bringing together those with differing views ahead of the final recommendation in March. Let's have a word with Thomas on this now. Look, so taking that statement from Wes Streeting, this isn't done and dusted. He's going to talk to others, but this is pretty strong advice, and it also means a lot of people will be disappointed to hear it.
For sure, yeah. I think men who do fall into one of these high-risk categories will be extremely disappointed. Those who have seen prostate cancer in their families and know how a late diagnosis really does affect people in a terrible, terrible way. It really is a very unpleasant disease once it has spread to the bones. They would have hoped that there would be some kind of screening program that would allow people to be picked up at a much earlier stage when prostate cancer is curable, and that's the sad fact. And we heard the exchange between me and the chair of this committee about this BRCA gene. Now, many people won't even know what that is. It is the Angelina Jolie gene. It is the gene that the actress went public with. She had it. She had a double mastectomy, a preventative double mastectomy, because her own risk of breast cancer was substantially higher. But many people wouldn't know that even if this woman has had a relative has had breast cancer or ovarian cancer and has had the test, and that's not always the case, that the men in the family would also be at risk of prostate cancer as a result. That kind of health knowledge isn't widely known, so many people wouldn't go to their GP and say, I need testing for this BRCA gene because my sister had breast cancer. And if that then comes back, they then return to the GP and say, well, now I need PSA testing for prostate cancer. There are so many hurdles there that I think very few men are actually going to get the kind of prostate cancer screening that will save lives.
Thomas, for the time being, really appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to have a word now with Amy Rylance from Prostate Cancer UK. Good afternoon to you, Amy.
Good afternoon.
Given who you work for, I suspect you're probably quite disappointed by this.
Yes, yeah, that's the simple answer. Prostate Cancer UK submitted evidence to the National Screening Committee that we felt supported screening for the men at highest risk of prostate cancer, so for Black men and men with a family history of the disease. And we were really hopeful that we might have hit a tipping point, that point where the evidence clearly shows that the benefits outweigh the harms. So, yeah, it's a really disappointing day that we haven't got that conclusion from the National Screening Committee. I do think that screening for men with the BRCA gene variant is an important step forward, but it's clearly not the big win that's going to save thousands of lives that we were hoping for.
Let me just bring you something that's come to our attention, which is a statement from Sir Chris Hoy, who probably is the most famous person with prostate cancer right now, one of our greatest Olympians. And I can say this hand on heart, a really great guy, because I met him a couple of times. So Chris says, I'm extremely disappointed and saddened by the recommendation announced by the National Screening Committee today to rule against national screening for men at high risk of prostate cancer. He points out that more than 12,000 men are dying of prostate cancer every year. It is now the UK's most common cancer in men, with black men at double the risk, along with men with a family history like myself. And he does go on as well, but we'll leave that there. Coming back to you, though, do you understand the committee's rationale for not doing what you and what Chris Hoy and others would like to see?
I mean, first of all, I'd say I agree with everything that Sir Chris Hoy said there. I think whether we understand the rationale will take a bit of time, because what the National Screening Committee have done is produce an evidence report which is over 200 pages long. So my team are going to be diving deep into that report to understand what is the evidence that has informed that decision. Do we agree with all that evidence? Do we feel that they've missed something crucial? Do we think we know that the evidence base is moving really quickly? Do we think that there are new pieces of evidence that have not been included but actually are highly relevant? And we will be engaging. There is a public consultation on this recommendation. It is only a draft recommendation, not a final recommendation. So we will make sure that we scrutinise what they've done, and that if we disagree with any of what they've said, that we make that very, very clear, because it's really important that we get this decision right. Because as you say, this is a huge problem. It is the most common cancer in England.
Yeah. There was a time when there wasn't routine testing for breast cancer in women. There was a time when there weren't cervical smears, for example. Does it feel like with prostate cancer and with men that they're at a similar point in their fight against this?
I think it's really important that we do the thing which is going to create the most good and the least harm. And what the National Screening Committee have said is that they think introducing screening right now will do more harm than good. Now, if that's correct, then absolutely they've made the right decision. We do not want to be in a position where we're inviting lots of people for testing, which is going to cause unnecessary harm. But we also need to be making progress to make sure that that doesn't remain the case. So at Prostate Cancer UK, we have invested £42 million in Transform, which is our next generation screening trial, to find safer, to find more accurate, more effective ways to screen men, so that in future, the National Screening Committee can make a different decision that will mean that all men can have access to screening.
Yeah, I'm going to reveal a little bit of a personal interest in this. And my father's oldest friend, he died of prostate cancer. I mean, everyone will know someone, right? You're only 1 or 2 steps removed from that. But also my age, 49 and a half, well, I'm thinking, well, in 6 months, I might be able to get that test on the NHS. But as I'm sitting here now, it feels kind of arbitrary. Is there some truth in that? You know, one day you can't, the next day you can.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was really pleased to hear Mike Richards say in the piece just before is that the National Screening Committee are going to be updating the guidelines for GPs. And I think that's incredibly important, because you're right, at the moment, it is too arbitrary. It's too much left to chance. It's about, does somebody know their risk? Do they know that they have a right to a PSA test for free from their GP? And do they feel that they are able to, they have time to, they can get an appointment to go and ask for a PSA test? So at the moment, the system is not working. And we can see very clearly that that bakes in inequalities, that it means that there are some groups of men who are far more likely to be diagnosed after their cancer has spread. I think what I would say to any people who are watching at home and are worried, Prostate Cancer UK have an online risk checker. It asks you a couple of quick questions that enable you to understand your risk. And if you're at higher risk, what you can then do about it. So I don't think people should see this decision as meaning that they are helpless in the face of prostate cancer. There are things that we can do today, but we do need to get to screening, because actually that is the thing that in the long run is going to save the most lives.
Amy, thank you very much indeed. That's Amy Rylance from Prostate Cancer UK.